In the hot summer of 1854, the dreams of Jeremiah Morris were filled with unbridled enthusiasm for what the future held. From his bedroom, he watched the new railroad take shape across his farm, believing that with each new track, unprecedented prosperity would follow. Morris's dream of prosperity was shared by many, who throughout the years called this land home. Morris never realized his dream, and for 150 years, the town that would bear his name would see its hopes raised and dashed before the dream was finally realized. Jeremiah Morris was hardly the first to take advantage of the fertile lands along what would later be known as Crabtree Creek. For thousands of years, native peoples lived in villages along its banks at the convergence of two well-worn trails. One, a branch of the great trading path leading from Virginia, the other connecting the mountains to the coast. Here, at a natural ford, Indians like the Saponis, Tuscaroras, and Occaneechees reaped bountiful harvests from the rich soil and benefited from trade with their neighbors. In the late 17th century, European explorers came down these paths looking for that same rich land. News of the fertile soil attracted settlers eager to buy land and find fortune. It was known as the backcountry, and its remoteness promised different things to different people. For some, cheap land. For others, autonomy from the eyes of the Church of England. Still others, freedom from slave masters in Virginia and Maryland. In 1744, surveyors arrived to measure a land grant along Crabtree Creek for Edgecombe County resident Francis Jones. Later, his brother Tignall Jones was granted the adjacent land and built his house overlooking the burgeoning crossroads. But soon, Jones and others joined a growing wave of colonial discontent with England and went to war to win independence in 1776. Tignall Jones joined the Patriot cause and led a company of men from the newly formed Wake County. Neighbors fought neighbors in a bloody guerrilla war. Tignall's men often clashed with local British loyalist David Fanning. Fanning's grotesque appearance earned him the nickname of Old Scaldhead, and his fighting ability made the war deadly for many in Western Wake. The birth of America heralded a new era of growth for Jones's neighborhood. America had gained her freedom from England. But not all Americans were free. The country's new prosperity was fueled by the labor of African slaves. In the county's first census, taken in 1790, Wake County had 2,463 slaves. By 1820, the number had doubled. But so did the number of free people of color. Along the road to Hillsborough, just north of Jones's community, a unique cluster of these families formed an independent community that would be called Shiloh. Remarkably, they would survive in a South increasingly struggling with race. In 1850, surveyors crossed the fields of white and black alike, plotting the new course for the North Carolina Railroad that would cross the state. They established the line along roads, over rivers, and by the home of Jeremiah Morris. He agreed to donate land for a station that would bear his name, Morrisville. The railroad now connected the village to the coast and the world. Morris became the town's first postmaster and tried to attract investors in a plank road to Chapel Hill. Support for the road never came, but prosperity did, through the labor of slaves, a decade of high crop prices, and the railroad's ability to transport products to faraway markets. But once again, events far away from Morrisville stalled a promising future. With the firing on Fort Sumter on April 12, 1861, America ripped itself apart. Southerners rallied to defend their way of life. Young men from the community rushed to enlist in a local unit, the North Carolina Greys, to fight a war they thought would be short and glorious. Young men like Isaac and Quentin Hudson drilled on the lawn of resident Williamson Page, to the delight of friends and family. Afterwards, they boarded a train at Morrisville Station, which took them off to the battlefields of the Civil War. None of them knew that 4 years later, war would come to their very doorsteps. The Union Army of General William T. Sherman fought its way across the South and arrived in Morrisville on April 13, 1865. More than 2,000 Yankee and rebel cavalrymen dueled, while Federal cannons bombarded the town. Lieutenant Joseph Kittinger's battery of New Yorkers witnessed the scene.
When we reached the brow of the hill overlooking this place, we saw a long, heavy rebel column of cavalry passing through the town and up the opposite heights. My pieces were brought forward on a run, and we sent the shell in quick succession right in the midst of the retreating Johnnies, scattering them in every direction.
After the battle, Union General Judson Kilpatrick took over a Morrisville home for his headquarters. The next night, he received a note from the Confederates asking for an armistice. The dispatch received in Morrisville would lead to the largest troop surrender of the Civil War, signed in a small farmhouse outside Durham. The thousands of Union soldiers camped in Morrisville were thunderstruck when news of President Abraham Lincoln's assassination reached them.
A sad, sad day. We heard the news of the assassination of President Lincoln. I never saw such a gloomy set of men in my life as the soldiers were after the news came. His loss is a great calamity, and the nation mourns his loss as she never mourned before.
The end of the war fulfilled slaves' dreams of freedom and opened the door to greater opportunities. One of the first steps was to establish the Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church, under the guidance of Reverend Ed Cole in 1867. The community truly began to prosper under another leader, Reverend James H. Dunstan, who encouraged his congregation to purchase farms, organize a co-op store, and establish a public school. Both black and white took advantage of the railroad, as trains became the literal engines of the economy. Thousands of small towns at the intersections of roads and rails exploded with traffic and commerce. This wave of prosperity washed over Morrisville, bringing the community together and helping the town develop a unique style. The excitement and extravagance of the time had a deep impact on one Morrisville girl who captured the town's distinct culture in her art. Mabel Pugh had a talent for drawing, and with it she captured the world around her in her book Little Carolina Bluebonnet. Set in the fictional town of Crabtree, Pugh's pen recorded the world she saw. She drew the mundane and the magnificent in a small town of the turn-of-the-century South. Her pictures reveal the intimate scenes of life in the Pugh home. Mabel may have drawn her artistic inspiration from her father, James Pugh. Pugh was Morrisville's most prominent merchant and didn't hesitate to show it. In 1868, he built his 2-story home directly across from the train depot and embellished it with intricate lattice and eye-catching pediments to make sure he attracted visitors to his business. He even added more decorations to his storehouse. Pugh was just one of several merchants in town during the late 1800s whose efforts fueled growth in Morrisville and championed its incorporation in 1875. The town grew, with 6 mercantile stores, 4 doctors, 1 liquor store owned by George Tanofsky, and a hotel built by Williamson Page in 1872. Together, these men promoted not only business, but education, by organizing the Morrisville Collegiate Institute, attracting more people to the growing town. This rapid growth eventually split the congregation of the Bethany Baptist Church. Half deemed Morrisville too far to go on Sunday, while the other half moved into town and founded the First Baptist Church. Another congregation, the Morrisville Church of Christ, built its unique Gothic Revival church right across the street. One new arrival, Samuel Horn, rode up the tracks from Clayton to open a mercantile store. Realizing the town's promising location, Horn started a sock knitting factory in 1910. Textile production changed the face of Morrisville, much like it had the rest of the South, as young men and women rushed from farms to take steady jobs as loopers, weavers, and pickers in the mills. The demand for housing forced Horn to build numerous homes for his new employees. This new development signaled Morrisville's growth from sleepy village into a town. Morrisville hoped to emulate another town down the tracks, which had grown big on leaves of tobacco. Durham represented a rail town that had used the railroad to become a hub of commerce. But Morrisville's hopes of prosperity were shattered in 1929 with the start of the Great Depression. In the next few years, deadly train wrecks mirrored the growing difficulties Morrisville faced. The town's school closed, as did Horn's mill, and passenger rail service ended. All were devastating blows that led the town back to its agricultural roots. During these hard times, some residents, both black and white, turned to making illegal liquor. Moonshine generated revenue for Morrisville and earned it a notorious reputation. After a decade of hard times, another lucky opportunity came that once again filled Morrisvillians' dreams with optimism. A few miles away, construction began on North Carolina's major airport, which attracted workers from across the state and new businesses ready to serve them. It was a bright ray of hope in an otherwise dismal world. But it would be instantly extinguished 2 short years later.
The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
America was now at war. Men and women of Morrisville left farms and shops to answer the call of their country. The airport became a busy military center, but life was tight in Morrisville, with government-enforced rationing of goods such as sugar, tires, and gas.
One time, I went to Raleigh and bought a box of shotgun shells and nylon hose. When I got back, everyone was mad at me because they hadn't had any for years. Tet Walton.
With the end of the war in 1945, soldiers returned home to Morrisville. The center of life in the sleepy village continued to be the town's churches and the stores. Veterans Cecil Sears and Bill Jones opened up a hardware store and the Red and White Grocery. They represented another generation of merchants hoping to prosper, no longer on the rails, but from the busy highway that ran through town. But without development, opportunities dwindled, and many left looking for jobs in nearby towns. The long-looked-for opportunity that would make Jeremiah Morris's dreams of prosperity a reality was just around the corner. Near Morrisville, a revolutionary new office park broke ground in 1959. It was one of the first of its kind and brought science, technology, business, and education together. Morrisville now found itself located in the middle of a triangle formed by major research institutions in Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill. The Research Triangle Park ushered in a new era of progress for surrounding communities. And by the 1980s, the boom had reached Morrisville. Over 100 years, from 1880 to 1980, the town's population had only risen from 165 to just 251. But by 2010, it had exploded to more than 16,000. At the dawn of the 21st century, the dreams of Morrisvillians are being realized. Fueled by an interstate and major international airport, Morrisville has become a bustling, diverse community. One of the newest groups to realize their dreams is the Asian Indian community, which has grown to become one of the largest in the state, around such community institutions as the Hindu Society of North Carolina. As it moves into the future, Morrisville still honors its past. Because of its gradual development, the town still retains reminders of its colorful history and its long road to success. Places that represent the dreams of generations to make the land along the creek and the rails and the road into a place of abundance, progress, and prosperity.